the cold-hearted depths of the 1940s, deep within Soviet territory, I found myself overseeing an experiment most disturbing. 5 souls, once vigorous and defiant against the state during the Great War, were chosen. Their crime? Daring to oppose our mighty regime during a time of global conflict. But we promised them a glimpse of hope. Freedom was dangled before their eyes like a carrot before a starving horse, should they survive the experiment's conditions. Our primary objective was to understand human endurance under prolonged wakefulness. With a newly formulated gas stimulant, one which threatened death in high doses, we promised to keep them awake for a month. The chamber we housed them in was cold, steel-lined, a prison of sorts but equipped with the basics: cots without comfort, books for distraction, sustenance, and a means to relieve themselves. In this era, technology hadn't graced us with the omnipresent eye of cameras, so we resorted to rudimentary microphones and thick, eerie glass portals to watch and listen. The silence of the watching, the suspense of the unheard, it clung to the air like a foul stench. The first days were unremarkable. Their spirits remained high, chatter about old memories, and laughter, though scarce, was present. But as the hours turned to days, a noticeable shift occurred. Conversations started dripping with despair, the past hauntings, traumas and regrets of their life choices becoming the sole topic of discourse. Paranoia soon followed suit. They began to distrust one another, the weight of their decisions driving wedges between them. Whispers exchanged secrets, strategies perhaps, on how to gain favor with us. One in particular became unhinged, his screams echoing the hallways, an endless wailing that persisted till his voice was nothing but a shattered whisper. Most disturbingly, the others paid no heed. 2 of them, perhaps delving into madness or seeking an escape, began smearing the pages of the books with their own filth, sticking them onto the thick glass windows. The room darkened, and the screams ceased, leaving an unsettling quiet. Days turned to nights, and nights to days, but from the chamber, nothing. We doubted our equipment, thinking our microphones faulty. But no, the readings showed they were very much alive, their breathing suggesting frantic activity. It made no sense. And then, 2 weeks in, desperate for any sign, any indication of their mental state, we made a decision. Through the intercom, we spoke of freedom, hoping to incite a reaction. What we got was more haunting than any of the prior events. A voice, eerily calm amidst the presumed chaos, spoke out. "We no longer want to be freed." The room fell into a chilling silence as debates erupted among us. The once clear line between researcher and subject, observer and participant, blurred. The chamber's door loomed in the distance, promising horrors yet unseen. As midnight approached on the fateful 15th day, we prepared to unveil the grim spectacle that awaited us within. The decision to end the experiment had been made, and so the chamber was purged of our experimental stimulant, replaced with what we imagined would be a rejuvenating gulp of fresh air. Yet, as the last wisp of the gas left the chamber, a cacophony of desperate voices erupted from within. 3 distinct cries implored, their tones drenched with an agonizing desperation, as if the very souls of their beloved were at stake. "Turn the gas back on." Our soldiers, trained for the horrors of war, were sent in to extract the remains of our experiment. But as the doors creaked open, what met their eyes was a sight more harrowing than any battlefield. Screams erupted, both from our once stoic soldiers and from the remnants of the subjects. Inside, the line between life and a grotesque semblance of existence blurred. Food untouched, but human meat, was lodged in the chamber's drain, creating a macabre pool, an unsettling mix of water and blood. It was almost as if they had turned to their own bodies for sustenance. Their hands, raw and skeletal, showed the brutality with which they had torn their own flesh. What lay within the confines of that chamber bore no resemblance to humanity. Organs, once neatly tucked within, now lay sprawled around them, still connected, still functioning, digesting chunks of their own being. It was a grotesque display of self-inflicted vivisection, muscles torn, lungs exposed, and hearts still beating amidst the chaos. Our soldiers, the elite of the elite, were not prepared for this. Resistance was fierce, and the subjects showcased a strength that seemed beyond human. In the ensuing struggle, throats were ripped, limbs mutilated. Even after one's spleen ruptured, his life force refusing to be snuffed out, he resisted sedation, snapping at the medical team, his cries of "more" haunting the halls till he lay still. Of the subjects, 3 remained, their psyches completely fractured, voices pleading, always pleading for the gas, begging to remain awake. The most damaged was ushered into a makeshift surgical theater. Sedatives had no grip on him. Even as the weight of a burly soldier pressed down upon him, he tore through his restraints, proving the depths of his desperation and insanity. The facility's walls, which had seen and heard much, had yet to witness such horrors. It was a chilling testament to the unpredictability of human nature and the dire consequences of meddling with the unknown. I, the scientist behind the experiment, was left grappling with the weight of our actions, questioning the very essence of our pursuits. In the depths of our cold, sterile operation room, the struggle to salvage the subject continued. It was an odd paradox. Using a little more anesthetic than normal finally put him into the realm of sleep, but with that brief moment of respite, his heart betrayed him and ceased. The post-mortem analysis was as chilling as the experiment itself. An unsettling abundance of oxygen saturated his blood, 3 times what should have been possible. The very sinews and fibers of his being bore the marks of an intense internal conflict. Muscles were shredded, almost as if they waged a war against the very bones they were attached to, which showed breaks in 9 places. Each fracture testified to the torment he underwent, resisting the constraints placed upon him. The second survivor's fate was no less harrowing. He, the initial harbinger of the descent into madness with his screams, was now mute, his vocal cords mere ruins of their former selves. Words, complaints, even screams of agony were beyond his reach. And as the anesthetic loomed near, he vehemently rejected it with frantic shakes of his head, as if embracing the impending agony. It was suggested with a sense of dread that perhaps the procedure should be performed without the merciful cloak of unconsciousness. To this he nodded in morbid agreement. For 6 relentless hours, surgeons and nurses bore witness to a medical impossibility. With every incision, every adjustment of his ravaged organs, he remained eerily stoic, a stark contrast to the turmoil within his exposed cavity. Dr. Kuznetsov, who had seen decades of the field's horrors, repeated in utter disbelief that the man's continued existence defied every known law of medicine. Amidst this surreal operation, a nurse remarked she'd caught glimpses of what seemed to be satisfaction in his eyes, a macabre grin every time their gazes met. When the ordeal was finally over, this testament to human endurance tried to convey a message, a feeble wheeze in the sterile silence of the room. An urgency in his gaze led a surgeon to present him with a pen and pad. The scrawled message sent a chill down every spine present. "Keep cutting." The next survivor was no less unsettling. His procedure, too, was carried out without the usual anesthetics, but a paralytic had to be administered, not to prevent his feeling, but to quell the eerie laughter that resonated through the operation room. When its effects wore off prematurely, those haunting eyes immediately began tracing every move of the staff around, the desire for the stimulant gas evident in every glance. Each subject, in their own grotesque way, echoed the same sentiment, a relentless desire to stay awake. Their restraints were bolstered, preparing them for another spell in that chamber of horrors. The looming question was what to do with them now. Our failure to meet the project's objectives made the notion of euthanasia tempting. But the commanding officer, a man with a past as shadowy as the experiment itself, saw an opportunity. In their tortured states, he discerned potential and proposed a continuation of the gas-induced torment, curious to see the boundaries of human endurance further tested. Despite the mounting evidence of the unpredictability and terror the experiment was unleashing, the researchers found themselves caught in a battle of wills. Their vehement objections to the resumption of the gas treatment were squashed with ease by the commanding officer's decrees. It was as if they were mere spectators in their own experiment, their knowledge and expertise pushed aside for some darker, perhaps military-driven agenda. In what seemed to be a desperate bid to maintain some semblance of scientific method amidst the spiraling chaos, they connected the subjects to EEG monitors, seeking insights into their tortured minds. The chambers, cold steel confines of horror, were modified with padding and enhanced restraints, anticipating prolonged exposure to the gas and the physical torment it may induce. An eerie calm settled upon the subjects when they overheard they'd be reintroduced to the gas. Their previous struggles ceased, replaced by a fierce determination to fight the seductive pull of sleep. One hummed an incessant, haunting tune, while another seemed to dance a ghastly jig with his legs, as if in tune with some dark rhythm only he could hear. The third, his eyes wild with fervor, employed a repeated blink, almost ritualistic in nature, trying to fend off the lull of sleep. As the EEG readings scrolled continuously, they revealed brainwave patterns that oscillated between the normalcy of wakefulness and the abyss of death. It was as if the mind was grappling at the edges of existence, trying desperately to cling to consciousness. The room itself seemed to pulsate with the tension, every researcher's gaze fixed on the erratic readings, save for one. A singular nurse, her instincts sharpened by years in the field, saw the fleeting moment when one subject's resolve crumbled. His eyes, the windows to his tormented soul, closed momentarily, a brief surrender. But that brief lapse was all it took. The EEG charted the descent from the precipice of deep sleep to the finality of death. The gravity of the situation became tangible. Panic, like a contagious disease, spread through the chamber. The lone-speaking subject, his voice a guttural scream, pleaded to be sealed within. His EEG mirrored the fatal patterns of his deceased counterpart. In a desperate bid for control, the commander ordered the chamber sealed, not just with the 2 remaining subjects, but with 3 of the researchers as well. A cruel twist to an already perverse experiment. It was then that the room's air grew thick with the anticipation of violence. One of the chosen researchers, his face a mask of horror and determination, drew his concealed firearm. In rapid succession, the sound of gunfire echoed in the confines of the chamber. The commander fell, a lifeless heap, a bullet between his eyes. The mute subject, his laughter silenced forever. But it was the final confrontation that would haunt the annals of this experiment. The researcher, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and desperation, demanded answers. He wanted to know the nature of the beings before him, the monsters that had emerged from the depths of the human psyche. The bound subject's response was chilling, a mirror reflecting the darkest corners of humanity. His assertion that they represented the primal, dark instincts that lurk within every human soul was more terrifying than any physical transformation they had undergone. As the weight of this revelation settled, the researcher, unable to bear the implications, took one last desperate action. He aimed at the heart of the subject, seeking to end the nightmare once and for all. But even in death, the subject's final words served as a grim reminder of the experiment's terrible revelations, a whisper into the abyss of human nature. As I stumbled out of that room, the weight of what had just occurred pressing heavily upon me, I couldn't help but feel a deep-seated dread. The facility's lights flickered overhead, casting eerie shadows that danced like specters. I had to escape this place, to rid myself of the nightmarish memories it harbored. Suddenly, a hand reached out, grabbing me. I spun around, ready to confront yet another horror, but it was Dr. Alexandrov, one of my colleagues. His face was a mask of terror, but there was a gleam of manic determination in his eyes. "We have to destroy the gas," he hissed, "before it's unleashed upon the world." Together, we navigated the labyrinthine corridors of the research facility, desperately searching for the central chamber where the gas was produced and stored. The dimly lit hallways echoed with distant screams, a testament to the havoc the experiment had wreaked. Upon reaching the chamber, we found it heavily guarded. But these weren't our fellow researchers, or even military personnel. They were shadowy figures, men draped in suits, their eyes concealed behind dark glasses. The real puppet masters behind this perverse experiment. The realization hit me like a sledgehammer. We weren't just conducting research for our government or military. There were others involved, higher powers with nefarious agendas. Dr. Alexandrov, ever the man of action, didn't hesitate. He reached into his lab coat and threw a concoction of chemicals at the guards. The resultant explosion cleared our path, and in the ensuing confusion, we rushed into the chamber. The vast cylindrical tanks containing the gas towered over us, their metallic exteriors gleaming ominously. "Quick!" Alexandrov yelled. "Help me release the emergency valves. If we flood the chamber with the neutralizing agent, it'll render the gas inert." Working frantically, we managed to release the valves. A loud hissing sound filled the room as the agent mixed with the gas, neutralizing it. However, our triumph was short-lived. The doors to the chamber slammed shut, locking us inside. Through the chamber's glass window, we saw those shadowy figures watching us. One of them stepped forward, his cold voice echoing through the intercom. "Did you really think we'd let you destroy our creation? The gas is more than you realize. It doesn't just expose the primal fears within, it's a key, a gateway." The room began to fill with a different gas, one that wasn't listed in any of our records. As I inhaled it, reality began to warp around me. The chamber melted away, and I found myself in a barren landscape, dark clouds roiling overhead, lightning illuminating grotesque figures in the distance. The figures approached, their features shifting and changing, but they all bore one similarity. They wore my face. They were the manifestations of my fears, doubts, regrets, and darkest desires. I realized the true purpose of the gas was not just to expose our internal darkness, but to bridge our world with another, a realm where our darkest selves roamed free. In the distance, a figure stood tall, distinctly different from the rest. He beckoned me. As I drew closer, I recognized him, the subject from the chamber, the one who had whispered those chilling words. "Now you understand," he murmured, his voice echoing in the desolate landscape. "This is just the beginning.